Hey guys, Mr. Backerberg here. In this video, we're going to look at solving absolute value equations. So in this video, we're going to look at some absolute value equations that are a little bit more complicated. So this first example says we've got the absolute value of 2x minus 7 minus 5 is equal to 4. When we're solving an absolute value equation, we always want to have our absolute value bars all by themselves on the left-hand side before we start splitting up our equations. So I'm looking at that extra minus 5 that's on the left-hand side, and I want to get rid of that first. So I'm going to add 5 over to the right-hand side. So we're going to get the absolute value of 2x minus 7 is equal to 9. Now that I have that absolute value all by itself on the left-hand side, now I can go ahead and split this up into my two separate equations. So for the first equation, I just get rid of the absolute value symbols and pretend they were never there. And then for my second equation, I get rid of the absolute value equations, but I change the sign on the answer. So that 9 turns into a negative 9. Now I'm going to go through and solve each one of these. So I'm going to start with the one in red on the left-hand side. To get rid of that minus 7, we're going to add 7 on both sides. So we're going to get 2x equals 16. Now we still need to get rid of that 2 that's attached to the x. 2x really means 2 times x. So to get rid of that multiplication, we're going to divide both sides by 2. So we should get x equals 8. Now with our other equation, we also have to get rid of that minus 7. So we're going to add 7 on both sides, which leaves me with 2x equals negative 2. And again, I need to get rid of that 2 that's attached to the x. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So we're going to get x equals negative 1. So our two answers for this equation are x equals 8 and x equals negative 1. Looking at our next example, we've got 3 times the absolute value of 2x minus 6 equals 12. Like we mentioned on the previous one, we want to get that absolute value all by itself before we split our equations up. So right now we've got this 3 out in front of our absolute value bars, and that means that we are multiplying this whole thing by 3. So if I want to get rid of that 3, I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And that's going to leave me with the absolute value of 2x minus 6 is equal to 4. Now that I have this absolute value all by itself, I'm going to go ahead and split up my equations. So for my first equation, I just get rid of the absolute value bars and pretend they were never there. For my second equation, I get rid of the absolute value bars, but I change the sign on the answer on the right-hand side. So that positive 4 turns into a negative 4. Now we're going to get our x alone in each equation. I'm going to start with this one in red on the left. To get rid of that minus 6, we're going to add 6 on both sides of our equation, which is going to give me 2x equals 10. Now I want to get rid of that 2 that's in front of the x. 2x really means 2 times x. So to get rid of that multiplication, we're going to divide both sides by 2. And that's going to leave me with an answer of x equals 5. Now if I look at my other equation over here in blue, to get rid of that minus 6, we're going to add 6 on both sides. So that's going to leave me with 2x equals 2. I want to get rid of that 2 that's attached to my x. So we're going to divide both sides by 2, which is going to leave me with x equals 1. So my two answers in this case are x equals 5 and x equals 1. Now, as I take a look at this example, I notice that there are multiple things that we're going to have to get rid of because there's several things outside of our absolute value bars. But I also notice that my variable is on the right-hand side. And typically, when I'm solving an equation, I always like to get my variable on the left-hand side. So what I'm going to do with this equation is just flip-flop the left and the right sides. So I'm going to take that 13, and I'm going to put it on the right-hand side. And I'm going to take that whole right-hand side and put it over on the left-hand side. So we're just changing the sides on both of those pieces of the equation. Now we're going to work on getting that absolute value all by itself. First, we're going to have to get rid of that plus 7. So I'm going to subtract 7 on both sides. And that's going to leave me with 2 times the absolute value of w equals 6. Now I want to divide that 2 off of the front, because having that 2 in front of the absolute value really means 2 times. So to get rid of multiplication, we're going to divide. So we get the absolute value of w is equal to 3. Now there's nothing happening inside of the absolute value bars, but we do still need to split this up into our 2 separate equations. So for my first equation, I just get rid of the absolute value bars and pretend they were never there. And for my other equation, I get rid of the absolute value bars and change the sign on the answer on the right-hand side. And now our w is all by itself, so there's no extra solving that we need to do here. These are just our answers. So we have an answer of 3, and we have an answer of -3. Now, as we take a look at this next example, I'm going to tell you that something weird is going to happen as we go through and try to solve this. So we've got the absolute value of 3x plus 5 plus 6 is equal to 2. And like we've done before, we want to get that absolute value all by itself. So I'm going to take this plus 6, and I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides in order to get my absolute value alone. So I get the absolute value of 3x plus 5 is equal to -4. Now right here, I'm going to tell you that this equation has no solution. And here's why. If we look at what's happening on the right-hand side, we've got a -4. Well, if we go back to what an absolute value really means, an absolute value is the measure of a distance. So if you were talking about the distance between a couple of cities, you wouldn't say that there was any negative distance between them. Distances cannot be negative. So if you're solving an absolute value equation and you ever get the absolute value of something equals a negative number, that's a big clue that your equation is not going to have any solutions to it. So you have to be really, really careful when you're solving absolute value equations. You have to be on the lookout for negative answers because distances can't be negative. Now on this one, we've got the absolute value of 3x plus 5 minus 6 equals -2. And I told you to be on the lookout for negative numbers. But this one is actually going to have a solution because we don't have our absolute value all by itself yet. You only have to look out for negative numbers when you have the absolute value equals something negative. But here we have this extra -6 on the left-hand side that we haven't gotten rid of yet. So the very first thing that we need to do before we can decide if there's going to be a solution or not is add that 6 over to the right-hand side. So we have the absolute value of 3x plus 5 equals +4. Okay, distances are always positive, so it's okay for this absolute value to equal a positive number, even though the initial number was negative. By doing that +6 on both sides, we've essentially gotten rid of the negative number. So now we need to go through and finish solving this one. We have our absolute value alone, so we're going to split this up into the 2 separate equations. So for the first equation, we get rid of the absolute value bars and pretend they were never there. For our second equation, we get rid of the absolute value bars and we change the sign on the answer so that 4 turns into a -4. Now we want to go through and solve each one. So if I start with this equation in red, to get rid of that +5, I'm going to have to subtract 5 on both sides. So I get 3x equals -1. Now I need to divide both sides by that 3. So my first answer is x equals -1/3. Now if I go over to my other equation, to get rid of that +5, we're going to have to subtract 5 on both sides. So I'm going to get 3x equals -9. Then if I divide by that 3 that's attached to the x right now, I'm going to get an x value of -3. So our 2 answers in this case are -1/3 and -3. That's going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching.